Showtime's greatest hero, a serial killer. I'm Joe Fulgham.
Hot dogs, ice cream, murder castles. Welcome to the Chicago World's Fair. I'm Kevin Leeson.
Top 10 helpful tips for the perfect murder. I'm Toren Atkinson. Tonight on CausticSoda. I'm Toren. I'm an illustrator and a musician. I'm the lead singer for the Darkest of the Hillside Thickets, which you may hear today in the intermission. Then to my left is Kevin.
I'm Kevin Leeson. I'm a writer and filmmaker. As well, I do a podcast with a couple other gentlemen.
Including Joe Fulgham.
I'm Joe Fulgham. I'm a web designer by trade, but have done some improv comedy in the past and enjoy just getting together and talking about stuff with friends.
Gruesome stuff. Today, as a very special guest, is Chris Stewart.
Hi, guys.
He's the head Ghostbuster honcho in North America.
I don't know that's how I want people to open, but I'm okay with it. Thanks.
Well, Chris, how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, okay, I'm a number one Ghostbuster honcho. I also, history major with a lifelong love of history, nonstop reading, and I design video games. You know, just to pay the bills.
Yeah, the regular schmear. He's like
It's a good life.
Every Joe in the corner.
Today we're talking about the perfect murder. Now, murder. Mortis is, of course, Latin for death, and mori to die. Old Norse mord meant slaying. So that's the basic etymology of the word murder. The phobia for murder, thanatophobia, necrophobia, are both fear of death.
Thanatos is some sort of...
He's a Marvel villain, yeah. Marvel Comics. Welcome
Marvel
to the
villain.
podcast, nerd.
I think there's a Greek titan in there somewhere named Thanatos or something as well, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Just Thanos.
Thanos. That's what I'm thinking.
Sorry,
of.
I'm a comic nerd, too.
Yeah.
While I was looking up phobias, I found some forums that were talking about fears and phobias, and there's this one person who wrote that they avoid being alone, that they lock their windows obsessively. A little quote here. I'm terrified to look out windows at night because I'm afraid that I'll see a face looking at me. And I'm afraid to look into mirrors because I'm afraid that someone will be standing behind me. I'm afraid to close my eyes in the shower because I'm afraid that when I open them, someone will be standing there. That's a terrible.
That is a
terrible
phobia
thing.
of everything. Do we have any updates on past episodes that we could impart upon our listeners at this stage of the game? I have one. Banks! Exclamation.
Yeah.
Logged on to the website and commented on our cannibalism episode, pointing out that Toren quite incorrectly identified the participants in the movie Alive as a Brazilian soccer team when they were in fact a Uruguayan rugby team. I actually knew that, and so I can't believe I didn't call you on it during the podcast itself.
That's a failure on your part.
It is.
If we question Toren, he beats us.
It's true. I was cowed. I was cowed by your research and thought you couldn't have dropped the ball that badly.
Silence! Should we talk about the Yes Men, the Dow Chemical hoax? From our Poison episode?
Yeah, this is actually from my brother Mike. Came back with this one, an update on the massive poisoning in India and how the Yes Men, who are famous hoaxsters.
I love that word, hoaxster.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm not 100% sure it actually is a word, but I'm rolling with it.
I still love
they
it.
got on the BBC claiming to be representatives of Dow Chemicals, saying that they were going to fairly compensate all the victims and victims' family of that terrible industrial accident, and that as a result they would be selling Union Carbide, selling it off to pay for this compensation.
Yeah.
And as a result, the Dow Chemical stocks dropped by 12% in a matter of minutes. And Dow Chemical had to come on the BBC the next day to say that they would not be fairly compensating any of the victims of this tragedy, that this was all in fact a hoax, and that they had no intention of providing any monies whatsoever for the relief of the still suffering victims of the
Bhopal disaster.
Okay, all I know is that when I do get a copy of Chris Pramus's DC Adventures game, I'm making a villain called the Hoaxster.
The hoaxster. That's a good one. Didn't you have something to talk about for radiation?
Yes.
A radiation episode?
I brought one.
Oh, good.
I saved it. I didn't put it on the website. The SL1, which stands for Stationary Low Power Reactor Number 1. A friend of mine gave me a book on horrific science accidents, and this was listed as one of them. What happened is in '61 in Idaho, the military is designing a number of small reactors designed for things like powering stations in the Arctic and stuff like that. And at the time, nobody had put two and two together on, say, having multiple control rods. So this system had exactly one control rod.
It's a monorod system.
Yeah, monorod.
When I was 12, I dreamed of owning a monorod someday.
Basically, there's 3 guys on site in this test station with the power reactor, and they're supposed to take it out and do some sort of regular maintenance thing. You're only supposed to lift the rod out 4 inches. And for reasons they're not quite sure of, it got pulled out 20 inches and went critical.
That's a significant difference.
yeah.
That's more than half.
One of the guys was basically in the middle of a messy divorce with his wife, possibly over involvement with one of the other 3 guys in the station. So,
Oh, it's a dirty triangle with a monorod.
yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So kind of a murder-suicide is suspected. But anyways, everything went haywire, alarms, so they go in, everybody's suited up and they're looking in the room. One guy's still alive, crawling towards the door.
Oh, no.
They run in and they grab him, and they pull him out and put him in an ambulance and
Yeah.
rush him off. They're looking around, they see the body of the other guy, dead. They're like, okay, well, we're just going to have to leave everybody out. And they quickly look around, where's the 3rd guy? Don't know.
I have been, and always will be, your friend.
It's complete madness. Madness to the point where the ambulance is rushing him. He dies en route. To which
This is the first guy.
The survivor.
Yeah.
The survivor. At which point, the ambulance driver's orders are, is put this suit on. Okay. Now drive this ambulance into the middle of nowhere, then get out and run. Their whole plan at the time was to just leave the dead guy in the ambulance, like he was that irradiated.
Wow.
They go back in to try to, again, figure out what the hell happened, and they think to look up.
Oh, no.
The control rod in the critical meltdown had set off a steam explosion. The control rod had basically picked the guy up that was over it and pinned him into the ceiling. So they kind of left him there, too, for the time being.
A control rod kebab.
Oh, I forget the numbers. I won't bring them up because it'll just be messy. Everybody was horribly irradiated, let's put it that way. Even the people going in and protected were well past kind of,
Oh, no,
this is
the
healthy.
safety.
Sort of. They say 22 people were basically irradiated in the process of this whole accident.
Just
sort
the
of thing.
rescuing?
Just the rescuing and stuff like that, not counting the 3 dead guys.
Ugh.
The 3 dead guys are interred in Arlington National Cemetery, 20 feet down, covered in concrete and lead.
Arlington Cemetery, that's in Fallout 3, the video game.
Yeah.
They should put up those giant spikes to warn people away from their irradiated bodies.
I have a correction, actually, on myself, given to me by my wife. One of the only comments I ever get on the podcast is when I'm wrong. For black holes, I had said I didn't think that the CERN reactor was...
Large Hadron
the
Collider.
The Large Hadron Collider was trying to make mini black holes, but she corrected me and said that, in fact, that is what they're trying to do, is create a micro-singularity.
Does that
It's
mean...
one of the many things they want to do with it.
Does that mean I actually was right?
Yes,
That's right.
you were right, sir.
Woohoo!
Yay.
It's the first time I actually researched somebody.
Let's talk about murder then.
Perfect.
Since we're all here.
Perfect.
Murder.
That's the sound of me rubbing my hands together.
With
It's a sound I've heard many times.
I was gonna say with glee. There is the point that if it is the perfect murder, how could we possibly talk about it? We wouldn't even know.
It does happen. It can happen.
That's for sure.
You cannot plan for it. And if you cannot plan for it, then by definition, you can't really have it. So it's this weird...
But there's premeditated murder. I mean, it happens all the time. First degree.
That's
Murder in the first degree.
premeditated, but this is what it comes down to. Perfect by definition means you get away with it. That is
Is
a very
this
broad topic.
This sounds like if a tree falls in the forest kind of conversation. If a murder is never discovered, did
If
it
a
actually
murder is
happen?
perfect,
Well,
is there
let's
anyone to hear it?
let me start with this little factoid. So in 2004, there were just over 16,000 murders in the United States. Statistically, according to FBI, something like 35% of them or whatever were not solved. They were not closed
Right.
that year, which means basically in that year,
5,000 or so.
6,000 or so unsolved murders. And if you then tie in the fact that they say that murders are solved in the first 48 hours or whatever,
Right.
the long investigation actually tends to be rarer and rarer.
Fruitless.
Even conservative numbers means that's a lot of people getting murdered and nobody getting caught. So ergo, perfect murders do exist. The trick is these people probably weren't planning the perfect murder. Perfect murders all come down to various circumstances. And if they all line up, awesome. The thing is these circumstances are outside of your control most of the time. Hence why you can't plan a perfect murder.
To my thinking, the perfect murder would be something that comes off as an accident.
Okay.
So it's, the police don't even suspect that it's a murder.
Ah,
I'm
right,
saying.
of course. Like they get a death certificate saying accidental death.
Yep.
Little arsenic and old lace.
I remember that movie.
Yeah, that was a great movie about little old ladies murdering their boarders so they can take their money.
So there's another group of statistics we can cram in. Say, for example, missing persons. Most of those people, unfortunately, probably are either through misadventure or deliberate circumstances are dead. But since they are, nobody's found and there's nothing else to suspect
Foul
murders
play.
and foul play, etc. So there's an even perfecter example of
Perfecter?
perfect murder.
And that's going to be
Hey,
my
you-
DC Adventures character, Miss Adventure. Not
before,
married.
Before we move ahead, if he gets hoaxster, I get perfecter.
Okay.
Just, all right, thank you. Jeez.
We're perfectly within our rights to talk about perfect murders that were planned to be perfect murders but didn't go off perfectly.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be kind of hard to talk about those ones where they didn't even know it was murder,
yeah,
because
exactly.
if it was perfect in that definition, then we'll just be talking about people who died, and
Well, I mean-
maybe it was a murder, but we don't know because it was perfect.
You can talk about guys like Klaus von Bulow, who thought they were going to get away with it, and they got convicted, and then it got overturned on appeal. Injecting the drugs into his comatose wife.
I don't know about it. Tell me more about that.
He was married to this rich New York socialite, and he was from a long line of European aristocracy, and they had several children. And his wife had some sort of seizure attack and went into a coma for years and years and years. And then one day she died. Her children accused Klaus, her second husband, of murdering her.
Okay.
By injecting some sort of drug into her that was impossible to detect and whatnot. The big controversy was that it was the children themselves that searched the premises and found this syringe which had this drug in there that would have performed this job, and turned it over to the police. But of course, they had a vested interest in Klaus going to jail for the rest of his life, because
Right.
then they would inherit all the money. And so he was initially convicted of murdering Sunny von Bülow, or maybe it was even attempted murder, because maybe she hadn't even died by that point, but she was in this long-term coma. And then it was eventually overturned upon appeal.
Was this a movie? Did they make this into a movie with Jeremy
Yeah,
Irons?
Jeremy Irons played Klaus von Bülow,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay. No, it's coming back to me
Yeah,
now.
there is a perfect murder gone awry, if it was in fact even a murder.
Whenever I hear of Klaus von Bulow, I think of the actor from
Strange Brew?
From Strange Brew and Conan.
Max von Sydow.
Max von Sydow. I could crush your head like a nut,
But I won't.
but I need you.
I need you.
So I won't.
I'll just jump back in here, because
Please do.
When you start
because
digging,
we are just
when you start digging into murder, everybody's brains will start churning up stuff. Trust me. Getting away with perfect murder kind of relates to one simple fact, and that is your connection to your victim.
Which is why so many serial killers get away with it for so long, right? With no connection.
Exactly. So most crimes, when crimes happen, statistically, detectives will always tell you they start looking at family and friends first, because more often than not, it is somebody that knew the victim. So that's where you start. And of course, once you have a place to start and you start digging and you dig hard enough, stuff churns up. People's stories don't match up, so you start leaning on that.
You definitely get a clearer picture of that if you ever watch that show, The First 48, about the homicide investigators and their first 48 hours on the case. You really realize that without those personal connections, it would be almost impossible for these investigators to solve these crimes.
That's one aspect, is your disconnect from
The victim.
Related to it, then, is someone's going to watch your back.
alibis.
Not alibis, because once they get to that point, again, there's trouble. What it amounts to is basically someone is obfuscating your connection to the victim. So the simplest way is to go historical on your asses here. Jack the Ripper. So nobody knows who the hell Jack the Ripper is. Jack the Ripper got away with what are basically considered the most horrific crimes, well, to that date, and still they kind of resonate through time. Never figured out who he was, although there are fairly solid theories going on. One, and it is kind of discounted, is that he's just random crazy dude. And by definition, then, random crazy dude wandering around the streets of London killing people, you'll never figure out who random crazy dude is. And there's actually one of his letters. He killed 2 women in one night, and one of them he copped to later in one of his letters. But apparently they would not have figured it out just by looking at her, based on the fact that she didn't quite fit the MO of the rest. And he even said in his letter that it was kind of rushed, and he got kind of worried. So even he was concerned that, he's in the middle of London. If he keeps doing it long enough, somebody just by accident may stumble upon him, and then trouble. The other theories tend to relate to the surgical skill of the murders, suggested, for example, that
A doctor or a butcher.
and there's, I think, a couple of names of a high society, a doctor of high society. He'll never get caught, just because in London high society he's just not beyond reproach, but of course England at that time, there was certainly a certain class thing. You didn't go after somebody unless you knew for sure at that level.
England at that time, it doesn't exist today.
Plus there was probably a lot of the friends of friends who were in a position to just say, don't look over here, go look for the filthy crazy guy that killed these women, sort of thing.
Right.
And then there's also another theory that it might have been related to the royal family, which is just, of course, the ultimate version of
Tabloid
there's no murderer here.
sensationalism.
So those are kind of the two things. But basically, the minute you start looking at them, the minute they start to fall apart, and they're not specific to Jack the Ripper. These happen all the time.
Yeah, there was the torso killer in Cleveland.
Well, and not just a matter of serial killers, but those two things still operate throughout time. Mob hitmen, again, no real connection to their victims, but they already automatically have a tie to somebody who's going to shield them. But those guys will obviously only shield them up to the point where they're at risk. So hitmen do get caught quite often.
Has anybody heard about this hitman who I saw an interview with him about 2 or 3 years ago on A&E? They did like a 2-hour profile on him. A hitman for the mob in New Jersey, I believe. When he got recruited, he had been a serial killer. Like he had done 3 killings just for fun,
right?
And then he got recruited by the mob to become a mob hitman. And yeah, he thinks that he's killed somewhere in the range of hundreds of people. He owned an auto body shop, so he had a lot of industrial material, and he used to like to dump bodies in oil drums and then abandon them somewhere or bury them. You know, it becomes one of those situations where you got these killers who are kind of trying to get caught, because he left the oil drum at the local gas station with his dead body in it, and he would go to the diner at the gas station every day to have lunch, and he'd like look at the barrel with the body in it, knowing there was a body, and he kind of got a thrill out of that.
Right.
One day he showed up and the barrel was gone, and there was never any news about this body or whatever, so he doesn't know what happened to it, and this guy just disappeared and no one ever heard from him again. And, you know, but this guy was a really interesting guy. His nickname was the Iceman, because he was a cold and calculating killer.
Oh.
He was really good in Top Gun, too.
He's as cold as ice.
He claims that he used to like to give people cyanide. He would go to where somebody was having dinner and slip some stuff into their meal before it came out of the kitchen. He found out one of his victims was gay, so he followed him to a gay bar and injected him with cyanide on the dance floor. Like, bumped up against him and jabbed him.
Peculiar.
Yeah, this guy was quite an interesting character. But yeah, he had committed multiple murders before he became a mob hitman, and so it was particularly suited to the occupation.
He had a good resume.
Yeah. Yeah, he strangled a guy in an alley behind a nightclub one time because the guy sassed him in line.
That's why you should never budge.
That's your anti-budging tip there, kids.
You hit on the next step, which is if you move away from hitmen to, say, serial killers, guys who are lone operators. You know, once computer databases had hit and stuff like that, it became a lot easier to spot trends, to go, holy crap, there's some guy wandering the states. And they're still working out studies that, because nobody was really paying attention to serial killers way back when, but there's some suspicions that as the highway system in the United States improved, that just made things even messier, because that's when guys started wandering. It was easier to wander the length and breadth of the United States or wherever to start killing. So the thing is with those guys, though, although they are perfectly detached and they've so if they're careful, they minimize the risk of somebody spotting them or whatever. If they have a system, they've minimized their risk. The trouble is they're technically crazy, and technically crazy people are then going to start screwing up. Like you said, some guys just want to get caught.
Right.
Jack the Ripper liked to boast about what he was up to and all that.
Oh, the BTK guy used to send photos of himself with his victims, right?
BTK?
Bind, torture, kill.
Oh.
Because that was his method.
Didn't know about
he would
that
tie
acronym.
them up and torture them and then kill them. And then he would disguise himself with a mask and whatnot and take pictures of himself with his victims and then mail those pictures to the police.
It's kind of like the Riddler, but different.
See, if it happened 10 years later, he would have swirled his face in Photoshop, and they would have caught him like that. But no, he had to use a mask.
That's right.
Yeah, he actually got caught because he was corresponding with the police. He asked the police officer that he was corresponding with whether or not a computer disk could be traced in any way, shape, or form, to which the police replied, no, of course not. So then he loaded a bunch of digital files and letters and all this content about his crimes onto the computer at his local church. And
Is that a 3 1/4 floppy?
It was a 3 1/4 floppy, and he mailed it to the police, and the police computer forensic department figured out which computer this was used on in about 18 seconds flat.
Right.
And they went down there and sort of took their profile with them and figured out who was a perfect match.
All right, churchies.
And they trailed him for about a couple of days and went, you know what, we're not going to risk this any longer. We're just going to scoop him up.
Yeah, let's watch him till he kills again, just to be really sure.
Yeah.
Have there been any
Safe.
sensational serial killers caught in Vancouver? I'm not...
Well, the Green River Killer, of course, in Washington State, turned out to be
Close.
Gary Ridgway. And that was, and then, of course, there's the pig farmer.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he's pretty sensational.
Has
He's
there been
world
any
famous.
yeah, the guy who killed
All those
dozens
prostitutes.
and dozens of prostitutes and then fed them to his pigs.
Then there's
Just like in Snatch.
Also Clifford Olson.
Clifford Olson, the child killer.
I want
Right.
to talk more about the pig killer.
How did he get caught? Because that would tie back into this whole thing about crazy dudes are eventually going to get...
It was a
would
tip
be-
from a ex-girlfriend / former prostitute who said that he had some sexual proclivities that were, let's say, on the sadomasochistic side, and he used to brag about if she ever left him and whatnot that she would end up getting eaten by his pigs like all those other girls that had been eaten by his
I
pigs.
see.
His name was Robert Picton.
That's right.
They're called
That's right. Picked in the pig farmer, and so yeah, she gave him a tip, and They took a warrant and rooted around his property and found DNA material of some of the missing ladies.
How many people did he kill?
They don't know exactly.
30 some odd.
Yeah, he's
Is their
being
best guesstimate.
charged for something like half that or something like.
Yeah.
So if he had
I
stopped,
think he's being charged in
if he
16
was stopped at a certain point,
He was
then that may have been the perfect murder.
He was convicted of the second-degree murders of 6 women, but he's also been charged in the deaths of an additional 20. However, the Crown has reported that Picton told the officer that he wanted to kill another woman to make it an even 50.
So he claims 49. If he hadn't have bragged to this prostitute that he was dating,
Then we may never know.
then we may never have known. The pig farm may have gotten away with it.
A little bit of background about that. Apparently, there's a big word on the street about some kind of serial killer killing Vancouver prostitutes, and there was not a lot of push behind the police to bother looking into it. They just thought that they were overdoses or women who'd run
right.
away or something like that. They didn't.
For years and years, that was sort of topic in the news about these women in the downtown east side disappearing.
And nobody in the police believed that it was some kind of serial killer. And then, of course, they're proven wrong when they start.
Well, it's a pretty
digging
high
up
risk
the farm.
Pretty
Yeah.
high risk group, drug addicted prostitutes, kind of fall off the grid pretty regularly. I would imagine.
I would guess so.
There have been, I know, pushes here in Vancouver to try to bring the sex trade under the auspices of the government. So the fact that all these women died is not enough incentive for them to make sure that they're, not getting addicted to drugs and that they're not, have diseases.
Apparently we're kind of lax here on prostitution. I don't know personally, but I understand that there are a lot of massage houses, I'm using air quotes, in Vancouver that are basically where they have prostitution, brothels is the word, and that the police know and that they just kind of turn a blind eye to it as long as there are no problems for anything else.
Right.
But back to the perfect murders topic. I guess the
No,
lesson,
prostitution.
the lesson to be learned here: stop bragging. You seriously
little
improve your
tip
chances
for murderers.
Yeah.
of not getting caught.
Plain Crazy will do it too. And the reason I brought up who was a crazy nut job in Vancouver was I lived in Calgary for a large chunk of my life. And that's where they caught Charles Ng. Him and another guy in California. The guy had a cottage, and between the two of them, killed like a couple of dozen women. Or went to the Bay, which the press, the United States press, likes to refer to as a hardware store. What did they know? And tried to steal a hammer. And security went after him, chased him into the parking lot. Two of them. He pulled a gun, shot one guy in the hand. They wrestle him to the ground. He's arrested, and he basically starts to talk.
That's another one of those. The guy seems to want to get caught. There's really no end in sight.
Stealing a hammer, instead of paying the $14.99 or whatever.
Yeah, exact. And then when the security guard chases you, instead of giving the hammer back and maybe a shoplifting slap on the wrist, he
shoot him in the
proceeds to
hand.
Shoot him in the hand.
or the broken fits, because apparently in his early life he was always running into trouble. He'd roll kids at school for their lunch money and would get caught shoplifting. So some part of him, whether he wanted to get caught or not, but just part of him was broken enough that he was going to do something stupid.
And aren't bullets fairly expensive up here in Canada? Like maybe a couple shots would be the price of a cheap hammer.
And not to mention that he had it as a handgun to boot. I'm sure coming back from California, they were like, "Are you going to be shooting that, sir?" No. Well, all right then. Come on in. I can only think of exactly one instance that perfectly fits the definition of a perfect murder. A murder-suicide. You plan it, you execute it, and you are never going to be jailed for it. Your plan involved basically taking yourself out of the equation. You got exactly what you wanted, and law will not touch you.
Now, how many murder-suicides are planned as murder-suicides? Do you know any idea of the statistics of how many are planned to be, I'm going to kill her and then kill myself, and how compared to how many are, damn you woman, kill, oh no, I killed her, and then kill
That's true. A certain percentage of them probably do fall under the category of
acts of passion.
There are many, many, many of them that include, like, the guys walking into a McDonald's. That was their plan. They are going to go in, they are going to shoot whoever's there, and they do not want to get caught, so they know that their out is going to kill themselves. So,
yeah, a guy did that in the 80s, didn't he?
Yeah, it's happened a few times.
Oh, okay.
And the Columbine kids.
Well, they didn't plan on killing themselves. They were taken out, as I recall.
No, they shot themselves.
Did they?
Absolutely. They were all dead by the time they went into the building, and that was part of the plan all along.
Okay,
Yep.
So they fall into that category as well. They premeditated the murder, they went in, they killed, and then, to avoid prosecution, took themselves out of the equation.
To avoid repercussions.
Which, you have to admit, is kind of a downside, because, again, perfect murder ideally suggests that you get away with it and keep on living.
I have a personal murder-suicide story, I could tell.
Oh, my.
Joe, dial 9-1.
Yeah.
And when I touch your arm, dial 1 again.
I'm assuming the story is not going to end with, and then I committed suicide.
And then during the 7th episode of Caustic Soda, the podcast,
I killed everyone.
I'm so glad I'm closest to the door.
this is when I was living in Chilliwack. My father had a partnership with another guy with a courier company, and my brother was working for that courier company. Do you remember this, Joe?
I remember the. Do you want me to say the name of the company?
No, probably not.
Yeah, okay, because it probably still exists.
Yeah, in fact, it
Okay,
does.
I do remember this. Yeah,
It's like
I don't remember
a franchise or something like
Okay.
that. So my brother was basically driving trucks around, and he came into work one morning, and the garage door was open, and usually he's the first one there, so that was unusual. So he goes in, and then while he's going in, another coworker arrives at the shop. And inside is a car. It's got a hose coming from the exhaust taped into the window. And in it is my father's business partner and his wife.
Wow.
Ouch.
The wife had been shot in the head with a gun, but the boss was still in the car, just kind of like, ugh. My brother, being the cool-headed guy that he is, didn't throw up. Whereas the other guy did throw up and called 911 and all of that.
And the perpetrator subsequently perished from.
No, he didn't die.
So attempted murder-suicide.
Well,
or murder-attempted suicide.
Something along those lines.
I dated a nurse at one point in time in my life, and she had this one stint in the emergency room, and they, often you have suicide cases come in,
Yeah.
and they used to refer to them as successful or unsuccessful suicide attempts.
Right.
They since disavowed them of that terminology because it connoted a good or a bad result, and they didn't want to give it any sort of that
Right.
weight.
Right.
So now they're instructed to refer to them as complete or incomplete.
Right.
So this is an incomplete suicide
This was
attempt.
incomplete suicide attempt.
They still give them gold stars, though. Which,
So here's the hilarious part of this story.
please.
It's actually not that hilarious, but my parents were actually on vacation in the interior somewhere. So when they got the call, they were considering coming back, canceling their vacation and whatnot. I was watching their house, basically. But unbeknownst to them, I had a lady friend along with me. So I was hoping that they wouldn't come back, selfishly, so that I continue my own personal vacation. The other bonus is, of course, the franchise, the outlet was dissolved, and the business partnership was also naturally dissolved, and I got a lot of office furniture and knickknacks out of the deal. So luckily, I didn't experience any of it firsthand.
So there's the
And
silver
I just
lining
got
to murder-suicide.
Exactly.
Free or cheap office furniture.
Yeah.
Well, the time has flown by,
an office
actually.
desk and a filing cabinet. We're going to listen to the Darkest of the Hillside Thickets song, available on Rock Band 2. It's called Shh.
Tonight
unclean, unsaid, unkind, undead, unwind. No fuse, no crime, no plans, no time, no push, no shove, no God above. No black, no white, no source of light, no second chance, no end inside, no flesh, no bone, no blood, no mess, no hate, no love, no sweet romance, nothing to see, no links, no ties, no time for that, no long goodbyes, no lies, no thanks, no secrets, no problem, no way.
I'll book you for false arrest and wrongful imprisonment and obstructing an officer in the course of his duty and murder. What do you mean, murder?
The Perfect Murder, our topic of conversation today.
The perfect podcast.
Our guest, Chris Stewart, I think has some murder myths he wants to debunk.
There are three legal myths that I've brought up that relate to the idea of a perfect murder that people kind of latch onto but are in fact absolutely wrong. Let's see here. What was the year? 1924. So there was an attorney, George Remus, who did a lot of work for bootleggers, ended up going to jail, at which point the FBI or G-Man or whatever that helped take him down convinced the wife to leave him. So he gets out of jail, finds wife is gone. Tracks her down, shoots her. He's caught. They take him to court. Remember, crime of passion and, husband out of jail. Okay. They pretty much caught him pretty easy. It goes to court, and it was one of the first times that they argued he can't be held accountable. He's nuts. And the court goes, famously at the time, all right, off to the booby hatch you go, to which he's like, wait, whoa. And he's like, you just proved yourself nuts. You're off to the nut hatch. To which, and this is the weird part, and taught everybody the downside of the crazy defense, he basically appealed his own nuts defense.
After he learned what it meant.
After arguing that he was in fact crazy, he then appealed to prove that he was not crazy and ended up going to just normal jail for murdering his wife. It got the nickname the Twinkie defense.
Well, the Twinkie defense was used in the Harvey Milk one.
The Harvey Milk one. He never argued it. It was kind of a media thing that they argued that because he was hopped up on sugar, that's kind of why he went.
His blood sugar was off the charts or something.
And they called it the Twinkie defense, although they never argued that.
Because he ate too many Twinkies.
But they did argue that it was some sort of extenuating circumstances, that he was just kind of off his game. And so
it'll never happen again.
This is the kissing cousin to the crazy thing, in that you're trying to, and there's been a number of them over the years, like the fugue state is a good one. Oh,
right.
They have no recollection, sleepwalking, whatever. Anything that can be filed, they tried to argue, yes, they did it, but they weren't really there or in charge.
Right.
In charge.
They weren't themselves.
Yeah.
Not guilty by reason of mental defect.
Pretty much.
Temporary insanity.
Yes.
Temporary.
They are very, very difficult, and they do not work. But famously, we hear about them. Like the other one is the idea of no body. The idea that if there's no body, there's no crime, and that's in fact false. It comes from people not understanding Latin. Because in North America, they don't teach us Latin in school, so we're kind of idiots about it. Corpus delicti is the Latin legal term, which means...
delicious corpse.
People assume that's literally no body, no crime, and it means no, the body of the crime. Hence all these people that get no body, but they saw you go in there, you came out covered in blood, you had a fight with them the night before. There's more than enough evidence that this person who has disappeared probably disappeared because you killed them.
I believe they call that a circumstantial case.
It's kind of died off. For the longest time, it was get rid of the body. People would come up with crazy ways to get rid of the body. And they're not entirely wrong, because if you can't find the body, people may not twig to that there was a murder sort of thing. But again, it kind of shifted over the years away from that no body, no crime, and into no body, no evidence. Because, of course, as forensics improved, if there's no body showing what they were stabbed with or poisoned with or whatever, it's harder to backtrack. That's 2. And then 3 is the most famous, which is the idea of double jeopardy. Cannot be charged with the same crime twice. So in Hollywood, it got into this idea of...
In fact, there's a movie called Double Jeopardy starring Ashley
Hot Pants.
What's the last name? I was going to say Ashley Simpson, but that's
Ashley
not
Judd?
it. Ashley Judd.
And Cranky McDude. Tommy Lee Jones. These movies and the books and all that kind of deal, they deal with this idea that somebody is wrongfully accused for a murder, gets out for whatever reason, then actually commits the murder, and then can't go to jail for it. Well, that's patently false.
What? Hollywood lied to us? Ashley Judd lied to us?
After she was in that Star Trek episode and I warmed up to her?
Well, this is it. They cheated in that movie because she ended up killing her husband, who faked his own death and blamed her, as an act of self-defense. So the whole idea, though, is that if somebody fakes their death, you get pinned for it. Then you go after them and you kill them. And thus, since you've served your time and been charged for it, you cannot go back to, you cannot be charged for it again. You get, I don't remember killing him. Well, that's manslaughter. Off to jail you go for whatever. You get out for 4 years, you track down your husband, you kill him. Well, that's cold-blooded first-degree murder of your husband, and they'll happily bring it all back.
So what we've learned, Ashley Judd, liar extraordinaire.
Never trust a Judd.
I'm tisking.
Yeah, we can hear that. It's not like shaking your finger.
Should we talk about the murder mansion then? What is it called?
Murder Castle.
Murder Castle.
Murder Castle. Sounds like where I go to get my death burger.
Sounds like an amusement park ride. Could be an amusement park ride.
Murder Castle.
Yeah, absolutely. But there
Are
was
you man enough to face the Murder Castle ride?
H.H. Holmes,
Triple H.
the original Triple H.
Oh, yeah!
Was a pharmacist who built a hotel, but he used several different contractors, so none of them would know the inner workings of his design.
Because it was like a medieval castle with lots of trapdoors and mazes and...
Most rooms were airtight and had gas vents installed in them, so he could gas you in your sleep, and then they would have trap doors that would dump your body directly into the basement, where he could strip your bones of the flesh and meaty parts and sell your skeleton to schools and for scientific experimentation. Mm-hmm. This is how he supplemented his income. And it was during the Chicago World's Fair, so there were a lot of people wandering in and out of town, and they would stay at his hotel because there was a shortage of places to stay.
Once you check in, you don't check out.
You do not check out. And
The Human Hotel.
he was one of these pioneers of having his employees take out life insurance policies, but he would be the beneficiary, and then they would disappear, and he would collect.
Wow.
I know that there's some corporations. Walmart does that right now.
Oh
today.
my God, Walmart!
Walmart, maybe they have their own murder castle, but
I'm sure they have many.
but H.H. Holmes sort of pioneered this idea.
So this went on for how long?
Several years, until he got to the point where he thought people might be figuring out what was going on, and he faked his own death, and this was, in fact, his undoing.
He would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those rotten kids.
It's old man Holmes from the Castle Hotel.
They pull the rubber mask off, and he's like, no. He faked his own death, and of course, to collect the insurance money on his own death, he needed to enlist a compatriot. And then about halfway through the plot, he became fearful that this guy would either turn him in or steal the money, and what are you going to do? You're supposed to be dead, kind of thing. They went on the road, and he killed him on the road, and then pretended to be that guy to collect the life insurance on his own death. And it was in the correspondence with this gentleman's wife, his straw man's wife, that the wife became kind of suspicious that she wasn't corresponding with her actual husband.
My sweetie would never say desiccated husk.
We're doing fine, sweetie, and we'll be back in time for that thing that you said that we should do with
or maybe he just
your mother and or father.
Maybe he just forgot her birthday.
No, I do. You know I love to cuddle. You're not my husband.
So basically, the Chicago World's Fair brought so many new innovations to the world to the point of absurdity.
I just can't understand the
Ice
drive
cream
that
and
these
murder.
guys have. I would be too lazy to be any kind of effective serial killer. Like the guy had a castle hotel built.
Hey, you gotta
and,
want it,
like,
Joe.
I know. I would just be the slacker of serial killers if I.
You would be in the cubicle pool of the serial killer world. You'd never make it
That's
to
right.
the corner office.
I'd be like, I could stab her, but my elbow kind of hurts.
Oh yeah, and then boiling her body until you could sell the skeleton for scientific experimentation.
Once she's dead, then she's dead weight, and I gotta carry
Well, this is
her.
why there'll never be a serial killer that is not crazy, right? Like, if you assume that the lone serial killer is the perfect murderer, except for they're crazy and they're going to trip up or do something crazy at some point, it means one of us, not the rest of the world, literally, us four, have to get into our head to just go kill somebody randomly, and we never will because we're wired correctly so that the thought of killing somebody just does not make sense. It's, well, okay, Toren's kind of not responding there, which...
Well, the pop culture crossover for this, the gentleman by the name of Rick Geary has a series of graphic novels, comic books, about Victorian-era criminals. And H.H. Holmes and His Murder Castle is an excellent, excellent book of Rick Geary's.
I think I've seen this.
Yeah, the Victorian-era crime series. It's outstanding. He actually has sort of one of those top-down cutaways of the murder castle. The
cross-section
the dead-end hallways and the trapdoors into the basement and the gas vents and the whole 9 yards. It's laid out there. So if anybody wants to see how this murder castle operated, they can just go out and find Rick Geary's H.H. Holmes
We'll try
edition.
I'll try to find a link for that and put it up on the website.
Yeah, it's
I
outstanding.
think it grew
Stephen
out of,
Beastie should put it in one of his incredible cross-section books.
I think his book probably grew out of some of the references I brought. I brought with me a couple of Paradox
the Big
Press.
Book of Thugs and the Big Book
Big
of
Book
Little Criminals.
of Little Criminals, and Gary does a bunch of stories in them, which
That guy's
ends up-
sick. I watched Rope, finally.
Outstanding.
Alfred Hitchcock, who, by the way, I forgot to mention, is our pinup for this episode. Yeah, so what can we say about that movie? There's two young gentlemen who, for kicks, decide to kill one of their friends, and then as the
Like you do.
pièce de résistance, they
Have a dinner party.
have a dinner party over his corpse.
And this isn't actually a spoiler. All this happens in the first minute and a half
Yeah,
of the movie.
absolutely.
That's how the movie opens up.
So they invite a bunch of people over to have dinner, and how come Johnny isn't here? I can't remember.
And they've left clues around the room because they think that they are too smart for anybody to figure out what they've just done.
But then Jimmy Stewart, he's the old professor.
Puts it all together, perhaps?
Sounds like the dark version of Weekend at Bernie's.
And that movie is shot in how many shots?
It's shot in continuous shots.
A
so
series of continuous shots.
I mean, they had to cut to replace the
Well, I was
the
watching
roll
it.
of film.
But also, I noticed that they always changed like the lighting in the coming up from the window and the cityscape and everything.
Yeah, very stagey.
Yeah, but it wasn't like they were trying to hide when they would cut, because they would always like zoom into somebody's back or something like that.
Yeah.
It would go black for a second.
But
So
the only reason they made any cuts at all was because
they had to replace the film.
they had to replace the film canister on top of the camera. But it's done, I think, in somewhere in the ballpark of a half a dozen continuous shots. So it's a technical feat as well as a masterful writing.
Good movie, yeah.
Yeah, great movie. Great movie.
And that reminds me of the real life killing.
Thrill Killers.
Leopold and Loeb, Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb from 1924.
A couple of guys who wanted to do a murder because they were bored. and
Yeah,
just to
some
see if they could get away
privileged
with it.
Harvard students who were the sons of like Jewish industrialists, and they decided to pick somebody at random from Harvard on a certain day. They planned it out meticulously, but they didn't plan out who they were going to get.
Yeah.
While they were on the campus, they're like, oh, no, not that person because of this and other person. And then along comes Bobby Franks, 14-year-old. They lure him into their rented car, stab him in the head with a chisel, and shove a cloth down his throat so he suffocates as well. Then they dump him in a culvert.
Yeah.
They say they've kidnapped him. They kill him right away.
Right.
But they only say that he's been kidnapped. So they call his dad and then tell him to bring a bunch of money to a drugstore. The dad forgets the address of the drugstore, never shows up. So that's one thing that goes wrong in a perfect murder.
Well, I mean, I don't think this has the hallmarks of a perfect murder from the get-go.
No, but that's kind of what their idea was.
Yeah,
we'll,
I mean,
we'll do this perfect murder.
If they had never maybe made ransom demands and
Yeah.
not killed him inside a rented car and all the rest of this stuff, he probably would have been.
The police didn't have any idea until they were just kind of like interviewing, and they got these two guys in separate rooms and asked them where they were and what they were doing, and the stories didn't match up, and so then they continued the investigation. And
I think one of the things that was notable from a press perspective, I know it was heavily covered.
yeah, it was huge in the,
was
in the
huge
press.
in the day.
And they went to
Because they both freely admitted that there was no real motive for the crime. They were
Right.
just
right.
thrill killers. They
Exactly.
were just deciding to do it on a whim.
And how do you do that? Hey, Toren, so like next week, I was thinking, we should we should kill somebody.
Well, that was
like
one of the
Roach?
things. Was the one that survived through his sentence definitely said that it was the other guy who was the mastermind.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of convincing what he writes about him and how he thought and all that kind of stuff like that. They're both very well educated, so, he could be a very good liar or whatever. But there does seem to be, it's definitely, they didn't come to this conclusion like totally like-minded.
Right, but so your buddy brings it up and you go, okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hey,
that would be fun. I'm kind of bored of being rich and having sex with hot girls while attending Harvard.
I don't have anything else going on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, let's go.
I'm not really excited about the football game.
And how do you even bring it up?
You know what
they
you
were
do?
close. They were close friends.
Okay.
Do you know for a fact that Leopold and Loeb were the influence for the rope plot?
I don't know, but
They seem very similar in a lot of
They seem very
different
similar
ways.
in the way that they decide. They're young, they're prosperous, they're bored. They decide to murder someone kind of just.
What
for
year
kicks.
was Rope?
The interesting thing about that case, though, is Clarence Darrow defended the boys, and he went on to do the Scopes monkey trial case. You can say the words.
I have my mic turned down.
Use your words.
1948 is Rope.
1948 for Rope. So 20 years after the Leopold and Loeb events.
Yeah.
And the original play was inspired by the real-life murder of 14-year-old Bobby Franks in 1954.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so you surmised it
Ding,
all
ding.
on your lonesome.
There you go. So my favorite perfect murder film/TV is got to definitely be the Dexter series. Now,
Yeah.
do you guys know about Dexter at all?
I haven't sat down to watch them yet.
Dexter is, of course, it's fiction. It's about a serial killer who works for the Miami Metro Police Department as a blood splatter analyst. He was adopted by a cop when he was quite young after his mother was murdered, and his father recognized in him his sociopathic tendencies and knew, I guess, from the experience of dealing with criminals like this, that it wasn't something that he could stop, only redirect. So his father gave him a code to only kill other serial killers
Oh, so the whole
who he could determine were definitely guilty.
So this is kind of a takeoff on the whole fact that serial killers have a tendency to have a pattern.
Right.
And so the established pattern for Dexter, he would kill other serial killers.
Right, yeah. Growing up, he would start to murder animals and stuff like that, and would get a little bit more ritualistic about it. His father found out, and so he redirected him towards doing it for the good of society. And that's really cool because you think he's kind of a hero.
That's
but
definitely anti-hero.
But at the same
the
time,
Punisher.
when he catches them, he straps them down to a table, all covered in plastic wrap, so that it's just like lots and lots of plastic wrap, naked, in a room covered in bags. Because he's a forensic analyst, he knows how to cover everything
Right.
up perfectly.
Right.
He has it all prepared ahead of time. He only grabs them when he knows he can do it, and then he cuts their cheek and puts the blood on a slide, and that's his little collection. So he's got a little collection of all these little blood slides from every single person he's killed. Then he cuts them all up, puts them in plastic bags, takes them on his boat, and drops them off the shore of Miami with rocks in the bags. It's brilliant.
I mean, the premise alone is absolute genius.
And Michael C. Hall is an amazing actor. He played he was in 6 Feet Under as he was the gay brother. And it's based on a series of novels. From what I hear, the hullabaloo on the internet, the series has ended up being much, much better than the novels. The novels...
A rare occurrence.
Yeah, the novels apparently fell into some kind of weird dark passenger, demonic possession kind of craziness.
Right, supernatural thing.
A little more supernatural. This is much more grounded in reality and psychoses and character building and cathartic killing of utter bastards. He shows the people he's killing photos of their victims and berates them for the evil they did while he does evil to them. It's really cool. Highly recommended.
I read an article once when CSI really first hit the scene, and there was kind of a concern amongst law enforcement who were concerned that CSI was going to kind of give away a lot of the forensic secrets, and that people were going to give criminals an upper
more
hand.
information on how to.
And I actually just read something very short while ago, again, where they were sort of revisiting this issue now that it's so pervasive.
Yeah.
It turns out the exact opposite is turning to be true because there's so many Hollywoodisms, there's so many misconceptions in the CSI shows themselves that it's giving some criminals a false sense of security about how hard it is to track them down, and so criminals are getting sloppier. Some of the police departments have found that they'll catch somebody, and their reaction once they're faced with the body of evidence.
That's not how it worked on CSI.
That's not how it worked. Hey, dude, they did the same thing on CSI. The guy got away with it. What the hell?
I've also heard that there's an effect on jurors, though, making it harder to convict people because they're demanding the more perfect evidence that they see on CSI.
Right. So easier to catch the criminals, harder to convict. How ironic.
Yeah.
I would recommend, since I brought him up, that people track down not the movie, but the book From Hell, which is Alan Moore,
Right.
which is
Oh,
always
yeah.
worth reading. Eddie Campbell, I think, was the artist. But the thing about Alan Moore, what he manages to basically string everything to do with Jack the Ripper together into this one big, long story. And you can get it all combined. That's a good one. And then I also recommend tracking down the DVD for Murder by Death. It's about an eccentric millionaire inviting parodies of all the Hollywood and mystery sleuths,
Right.
and then challenging them to solve a murder.
Is it a comedy?
It's very much a comedy. If you want to see Alec Guinness,
And I do.
yeah, he's in it as the butler. Peter Falk as Sham Diamond.
Just one more question.
And throughout the whole thing, hints that Sham Diamond is perhaps a little light in the loafers. So it's just bizarre.
Why did you slip from Columbo into Bob and
I
Doug
don't know.
McKenzie
I couldn't finish that.
You,
I
you
really
start
couldn't finish my
Columbo, and you totally end up Bob and Doug McKenzie.
As a matter of fact, Strange Brew is about a murder.
True, absolutely.
There we go.
I always think of it as a movie about a mouse in a beer bottle.
Oh, that's just how it starts, sir.
Absolutely.
But it
It's
is
the
a murder
kickoff.
mystery.
It
It
is.
is a murder mystery.
Well, thanks a lot, everyone, for listening. As usual, you can email us at info@causticsodapodcast.com or comment on our website or go to our Facebook page. And it's a very special, super awesome thanks to Stewart for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys.